traditional roles.
Correct.
Traditional roles of a husband, traditional roles of a wife.
What are the traditional values or the traditional roles?
Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. This is Dr. WeTheGarzas Jr., and this is...
And I'm WeTheGarzas, licensed marriage and family therapist. Hi, everyone.
Hey, guys. So, again, welcome to our Marriage Matters podcast. We've done a few of these already now, so we're getting the hang of it. I think we're feeling good about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're getting the hang of it. We're getting comfortable. Right now we were talking about what we're going to talk about. So we're excited about this next topic.
Yeah. So again, just thanks for joining us. If you can, share this with someone, subscribe there on YouTube channel. It would mean the world to us.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Well, today we have an interesting one. Well, I think they're all interesting, but today this one has a little bit of, how could I say it? It has a little bit of a dynamic to it, maybe, because today what I want to talk about is the role of a husband. All right. So we're going to get into it in just a little bit.
Well, we're actually going to talk about the role of a husband and a wife, but today's segment, we will specifically be looking at the role of the husband. And we'll kick off our two segments with that one.
Yeah, let's do it. So first and foremost, I wanted to share with you what the definition of a role is.
Correct.
Okay, we talked about that. So a role is a character assigned or assumed, okay, or a socially expected behavior pattern, usually determined by an individual's status in a particular society.
Right.
Okay, a part played. All right, so that's what a role is.
Right. So in a relationship, each partner needs a role. You have to have a role.
So, right.
Even within families. But today we're specifically going to be talking about the role of the husband, but because there does need to be a definition to what that looks like.
Sure. So again, a part assigned, right, in the society, or right, is what we read. So here we go. In Genesis chapter 2, all right, I went back to Genesis chapter 2, and I was reading verses 15 and 19, and I want to kind of share that with you so you can kind of get a little bit of context where we're beginning, all right, today. So it says, the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. All right, so let's visually, go back there, right? Thousands of years ago, the Lord taking Adam and placing him in the Garden of Eden and assigning
him a role.
These roles. All right, so the role is to work it and to keep it. Okay, so that has me thinking a little bit, right, about what that role is. We read a little bit later in Scripture that then the Lord forms Eve, right, and then that role comes in now of a woman,
role. Exactly.
Right? So, but before we get there, let's talk about the man a little bit. So, to work it and to keep it. That was his assignment at this point in biblical history. So, where we are now, right now, we're talking about traditional roles.
Correct.
Traditional roles of a husband, traditional roles of a wife. Right now, talking about the husband. Okay. But there's a word there that we talked about, traditional. Okay. Because we talk a lot about traditional values, conservative values, all these things, right? Which in our explanation, perhaps we think, well, in the area where we live, we have some traditions
based on the culture, based on the way we live life,
right?
Everything that's expected from us and what we've been taught down the line. So absolutely.
There you go. Even what we eat, right? What we, how we dress, the things that we do in our free time are a lot of times very cultural or traditional.
Right. Okay. And in a sense, tradition is something that we inherit because we learn it from childhood and it stays with us even into adults. So we inherit tradition.
Right. Okay. So my hope through this, through this conversation, would be that we don't just talk about traditional things, but we talk about, in our case, because this Marriage Matters podcast is founded on biblical definitions of marriage.
Correct.
So not just what's traditional, but what is biblical.
Right. And I think that's where, you and I were having this conversation earlier because we want to say traditional, and traditional has to some people, it has a good ring. It's like, I'm comfortable. I grew up in a very nice home. The roles and the expectations of a wife and a sibling and a woman was very clearly founded. But for other people, the word traditional would not be as helpful. So that's where we want to come in. And instead of using what are the traditional values or the traditional roles, we want to insert biblical, because we don't want to look at culture, because cultures are different all across the world. And what we had talked about earlier was, we tend to think, well, this is how we do it, so this must be the right way.
Right.
Whereas somebody in another country like Germany does it completely different. So does that mean that if we do it right, then they do it wrong? Well, so we want to stay away from those barriers, and we want to look at, what does the Bible say about the roles of a man and the roles of a woman? Today we're talking about the roles, once again, of the man, of the husband.
Right. Beautifully said. And that's what we're going to intend to do through the rest of our conversation. So again, going back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, and you can read this at home, you can get it on your Bible app. But I see the picture of Adam, right, coming into this Garden of Eden. And now, basically, God is telling him, you are the keeper of this garden. In other words, you're gonna
work it.
You're not just gonna show up. You're gonna work it, and you're gonna keep it.
Right.
So that embodies the role of this man now in this garden.
It was very clear what was expected of him, his role.
There's no ambiguity here. It is just it's as clear as day. So now I kind of take that into myself now, right? I don't have a Garden of Eden, but I have a Garza garden.
Right.
What do I mean by that?
It's symbolic.
What do I mean by that is, now I have a wife, and I have my children.
You have a home, a family.
I have a home. I have my family. I'm a son, but I'm also a father. I'm a cousin, a brother-in-law, right? We have sister-in-law. Our garden now is where God has placed us in. So now we're inside of these family units in which I have a specific assigned role from the Lord. I have my own garden now that God has placed me in.
Correct.
For such a time as this.
Right.
Right?
And I think that the challenge is that the assignment for your role continues to be the assignment that it was for Adam within the Garden of Eden, to work it and to keep it.
Right. I want to go deeper now with that, right? We know those two things. So how do we work it and how do we keep it? Well, not only am I assigned the role now as provider, right? Because that's what God says. You're going to work it. What does work it mean? Is that you're going to put your hands into the soil. Your feet are going to move. Your mind is going to think, right? Where we provide not just an economical refuge, but we also provide things within our garden, in this case, my family, that are going to allow my family to thrive, to grow, to be fertile, and we can go on and on about this. So God has called me not just to be to work it, to provide for it, but also to protect it. Right. I can imagine Adam in this garden protecting what was in the garden, the animals, the trees, everything that was in there. And the same assignment I have today is protect you, protect my children, not just from hey, wear your seatbelt, but protect you in the spiritual sense as well.
Well, I think when we consider provision or protection, there's a whole list of, I think of an umbrella, right? You are provider and protector. Well, it's like carrying around an umbrella. Right. Protection from us could very well mean different than another family. Like, what are the things that you need to protect us from might be different than what from another husband or another man might need to protect his family from or provide for. So it's a very clear role. Like, you have to be aware of what the protection needs to be, right? So that means you need to be involved in the family. That means there needs to be, as we've talked about before, conversations that need to take place so that you know what that looks like.
Well, yeah, and to protect, I have to be aware of the things I'm
Right.
protecting the family from, right? In the case as a man, what are things that can come against you, or things that can come against my children? Not just in the physical realm, but more importantly in the spiritual
Right.
realm, right? To be aware that we have an enemy that prowls around like a lion, seeking to whom to devour. But beyond that, too, I'm giving the assignment through this example of being a cultivator, right? To look at a garden, to see my family, and to at times uproot things that are constricting or that are choking our home. Whether that would be, we can talk about it, whether that would be, I don't know, right now the big thing right now is social media, right? It is maybe movies or things like that sometimes we traditionally inherit that are not biblical, and instead of enhancing or cultivating the garden to grow and to flourish, are holding the plant down, right? Or not allowing the plant to extend its branches the way it should.
Right. And right now, as you were talking, I had this mental image of like a gardener or a farmer, right? You're cultivating, you're talking about cultivating. Well, and we're talking about awareness, but I have this image of a farmer or somebody that's toiling the land. They're walking and they're observing each row. They're observing the land. They're aware of the dangers that exist around it. Because if you're not aware of the dangers, if you're not aware of the attacks, how will you know where to work harder? If there's weeds that you got to pull out, that means that you had to have spent some time within the garden, within the land, within the seeds.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point there of how, as a husband, as a father, our responsibility is to observe, right? To walk the land, to walk the toil for our families, right? And keeping our eyes out for certain things like, hey, this doesn't go here, right? Or that's not the plant that I planted. I need to uproot that and get that out of the way. Because at the end of the day, this garden, and I'll call it the Garza garden for us, right, is my responsibility. And what I believe the Lord has put me in this position for is to see this family blossom and to thrive, right? Whatever that would be, whether it's in the natural too, whether it's career-wise, whether it's in the secular sense, but also more importantly in the spiritual sense, right? That we're going in the direction and growing in the direction that God has for us.
And I think that, as far as your role as a husband, we talked about working it and keeping it. That's so key for a husband, and I'm all for it on that. But on the other side, we're not talking about the roles of a wife yet. On the other side, I have to not just be in agreement, but I have to accept that assignment and that role over you. I have to allow you to do that. I have to give you the authority that God has given you. I have to be in agreement with it. Because if I stand in the way, if I try to stop you, if I try to assume that role to take it away from you, then we're so focused on I want this role, I want this authority, that while we're arguing or while we're trying to figure this out, things are growing in the garden that should not be growing. There's threats that are coming in that we're not paying attention to. So it's so important that as our husbands assume that position, assume that role that God has assigned over them, that not just are we in agreement, but that we are praying and that we are providing.
And we're going to get to more into the spouse's, the wife's role, on this next one. But it takes me to this: how do I ensure, as a husband, as a father, that I am working and keeping what God has called me? Well, I go back to John chapter 15, verse 5, and Jesus says, "I am the vine; you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." And so that's my responsibility. Now, part of my cultivating and my protecting and my providing is making sure that I'm connected to the source. I can't do anything without the Lord. That's what those words are in red letters. These are Jesus's words saying, apart from me, you can do nothing. So Jesus reminds us of this, our responsibility to remain in him. While we remain in him, we will bear much fruit, right? The things that God has given me, in this case, the gift of you, the gift of my children, is that I am in my assigned role. I am doing everything within my ability to stay connected to Christ so I can make sure that you all are thriving, that my family is thriving, that I'm thriving as a man. Because if I'm not thriving as a man, then what can I give to you? What can I give to my children?
And I think that the beautiful thing about accepting that this is a role or assignment that God has given you is knowing that if God has given you that role in this assignment, then he will give you the resources and the tools and the abilities and the skills and the talents that you need to fulfill that role.
Yeah, so not much more that we can say here. Well, actually, there is a lot that we can say here. I'm just saying for the time that we have. I hope this brings some clarity. Maybe it gives you an opportunity to have a little bit of a discussion, maybe with your spouse. And hey, comment here. Maybe there's some things that you would like for us to add to this, or maybe we can do different segments that have to do with this. But for right now, this is where we want to end. So again, thanks for joining us. I'm Dr. Elias Garza Jr.
And I'm Ruby Garza, licensed marriage and family therapist.
We will see you soon on the next one.